Hello and welcome to Albion Obsessed. You join us for a very special episode where we welcome on Johnny Cantor, the voice of Brighton and Hove Albion. Johnny, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you for giving up your time. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well indeed, actually. Already missing the football, of course, but the fixtures are out next week, so we've got something to get excited about.
Most definitely. I can't wait to see those fixtures, who we get first. Johnny, just before we move on, is there any fixture that you don't want first, that you just think to yourself, oh, the first fixture of the season, oh no?
From a purely practical point of view, I actually quite like getting some of the longer trips over and done with. Actually, in August is not too bad. Okay, people are on holiday and stuff, but in terms of the practicality, just getting a few under your belt is quite nice. So I wouldn't be offended if I have to go to Newcastle on the opening day of the season. But there's a few in there that I'm quite glad that I'm not going to have to do because they got relegated. So, but no, I don't really mind. I think it's going to be an away game because it's Pride weekend in Brighton and Hove, so I can assume we'll be on our travels. But now I've said that, we're bound to get Newcastle away, aren't we?
The big damn Burn derby. That's a bit of a tongue twister for you there. We also welcome back Joe. Joe, mate, how are you doing?
Hello, mate. Yeah, it's been a while since I've been on. Been moving in the meantime, so settled here in Littlehampton now. So yeah, it's good. Actually, funny story. The other day we were walking through like the back end of Littlehampton, quite a nice area, to the shop, and I saw Antef Songi on my way there. So that was quite nice. I was like, hold on a minute. But yeah, no, I'm good, mate.
Was he starstruck? Was he like, that's Joe from Albion Obsessed?
He was, yeah, he was.
You should have collared him and tried to get him on the podcast, mate. Always next time. And we also welcome back Curtis Friend. Curtis Friend, how are you, my friend?
I am excellent. Thank you, Thomas. Yes, glad to be back as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, so as Johnny's alluded to, there's no football at the moment, which is a bit disappointing for us football fans. However, we have got a very exciting episode. As I say, we welcome on Johnny Cantor, JC, the voice of Brighton and Hove Albion. JC, you'll have to forgive me as I just fanboy a little bit. I've been listening to you on my radio for a long time, and there's something quite magical, I feel, about radio that you just don't get with television. So a bit of background about me, Johnny, is I'm Sussex born and bred, but I now live in the West Midlands, so can't always get down to home games. So I rely very much on you and Warren to bring me all the match analysis and the commentary. So it's a genuine pleasure to have you on the show today, mate. We always like to start these guest interviews with some pretty generic questions, but I think it helps build the picture of the guest we've got on. And the first question I want to ask you, mate, is what was your first game going to watch Brighton in the flesh?
Well, my first game covering them was Bristol Rovers away in 2009. It was a midweek game. I remember it being. It wasn't great weather. I seem to remember that, and that was my first game as a reporter for Brighton and Hove Albion. I do remember Gary Hart setting up, I think, Calvin Andrew for a winner. I think it might have been 2-0, 2-1, and in fact, that was the start of the Great Escape. I don't know how many points they were adrift at that point when I arrived. Obviously, I take total credit for everything that happened at the end of that season and them staying up on the final day. But that was my first. And actually, I think what I do remember is being very close to the fans. And actually, there was a great atmosphere. If you think, you're rooted to the bottom of the table, you might expect it to be pretty dour. But actually, the Albion fans were fantastic that night. And that was a sign of things to come. So, yeah, thankfully for me, ever since that first game, it's been pretty much an upward trajectory.
Amazing, yeah, and you see the players in a different light to what us fans do. So you can take this question any angle you like. But who's your favourite player, either interviewing or watching, just anything you like, really, however you want to take the question.
I'm glad you didn't ask me for my worst interview. That would be revealing something, I guess. But no, I think probably the most exciting player. When I got really excited, when I thought, hang on, this is something special, was Vicente. He technically was something that I don't think anyone had seen at Brighton and Hove Albion. They'd had great players. I don't think there's any two ways about that. But I think this was just like a start. Okay, yes, he was coming towards the end of his career, and it was a shame he kept picking up those injuries. But technical ability, just that excitement. I mean, literally, I know fans get off their seats, but literally, I was like that when I first saw him play for the Albion, and that was really, really exciting as a commentator, particularly. I've always had sort of a soft spot for Liam Bridcutt. Not because something that obviously we'll talk about maybe a little bit later, but actually he was a key component in that side. He linked everything together. He did the sort of the slightly mundane stuff that no one got the credit for, and he just went about his business. You could see his class, Chelsea upbringing, fantastic, you know. And for me, he was like a little cog in the wheel, really, and probably the most underrated player, personally, I think was Gordon Greer. I think he was an incredible captain. I think he was an incredible leader. And one person, obviously, who I interviewed on countless occasions, but actually he was like, it was a really sort of solid person as well. And I think he didn't really get the credit for what he achieved, sort of probably on the pitch and probably in the dressing room as well. So there's three for slightly different reasons, I suppose, in terms of some of my favourite players.
Yeah, just touching upon Gordon Greer there, it's actually really pleasing to see him back at the Albion in the loaned manager position, I believe. But yeah, he was, as you say, JC, a fantastic captain at Brighton. And yeah, I think during those early Amex years, you know, absolutely fantastic. Definitely what we needed at the club as our captain.
He's a pretty good summariser as well, actually. He's done a couple of games. I don't know whether you would have been listening for those ones, but he's done a couple of games for us, and he's very insightful. Obviously, he's an international, and he just gets it, really.
So basically, throughout the time that you've been watching Brighton, what would you say has been your favourite shirt that we've donned?
Well, I mean, I did have a think about this one because there's so many, isn't there? I've actually gone slightly against the grain for this one. I always said I would never want to watch a club that played in green. Partly because it's a nightmare for a commentator, but it just doesn't seem right somehow for football because it's got a green background. But I loved the green and black away strip, synonymous with the likes of Gary Dicker, Andrew Crofts, Will Buckley, Craig McHale-Smith. It was just at a time when, I mean, I know now it's big business, isn't it? Football shirts, and you've got loads there which look really, really cool. And I do love some of the older ones, of course, you know, the skint one as well. But actually, I did love that, and it was sort of the start of when everyone was going slightly neon, weren't they? And I thought, I really like this. I have to admit, I really like this shirt. So, and obviously, good memories from on the pitch. There was, you know, I think they performed really well in it. So that's a real favourite of mine.
Yeah, I absolutely love that shirt, the green and black stripes. And also, what a shirt to start our career at the Amex in as well for our away.
Yeah, absolutely. I was very lucky. I don't have much memorabilia, if truth be told, because I quite often actually give it to people probably more deserving than me. But I do have one thing that I have kept, and that's a fully signed League One promotion shirt, the home kit. So that is a favourite of mine as well, because that season was very special for me as a commentator.
Yeah,
I absolutely love that shirt, but I got it when I was like 14, and I got it in a size boys large. Definitely doesn't fit me now, it's safe to say. So I'd love a bigger one.
It's funny when you say about like shirts being synonymous, because that 2011 promotion one just reminds me of Glenn Murray with the whole hand to the head celebration.
Absolutely, Tom. Yeah,
absolutely, I agree. Love it. Big fan of Glenn Murray. Always have been, always will be. So, Johnny, let's talk about your punditry then. I suppose for maybe the casual listener or the listener who's not really sure about how people get into it, how do you get into like sports punditry? Is there like a course you take at a college or a university, or you know how did that happen for you?
Well, people often ask me what was my first ever game in terms of covering games. And I say England against Poland in 1974. Now, you're probably a little bit young to maybe even be alive at that moment in time. I was alive. But the reason I say that game, because it wasn't heard by anybody, because it was literally on my carpet floor in my lounge playing Subbuteo with my brother. That is how I kind of started. I just naturally started talking. And that's where it came. I was, I think, 6 turning 7. And that's how it started for me. I used to listen on a little chrysalis radio in my bed underneath the pillow, European nights when I shouldn't have been, all those sorts of things. And that's why I love radio. That's how it all started for me. When I left school, again, I am quite old, so there weren't such thing as media degrees and things like that then, and I didn't really know anyone, and I'd sort of given up on my I suppose my dream really of becoming a commentator. And then I decided to pack it all in, save up some money, and go back to university. A fair few years on, and I retrained, and I'm actually a news trained journalist, so I've got a master's in multimedia journalism. I've covered and continue to cover news. I even cover elections. It's not just football commentary that I do for the BBC. So that was sort of my background. And I always say, because I'm often lecturing to students and potential sort of reporters, commentators, if you can do, all the other bits as well, it really holds you in good stead, even if you really want to do sport, because, sport is about business, it's about finance, it's about legal issues, all those things as well. So I think you have to be quite multifaceted, really. And then I just got the opportunity and I did work experience, and I actually started off in television. But my love of radio, I think, always sort of centered me to doing radio commentary, and I do love it. I think they're two very different disciplines, and they're just different. There's not I don't think there's one particularly better than the other. I love the way that you can express yourself in radio. And even if you think about television commentary, sometimes on, say, even Match of the Day, you're actually doing it on your own. You're not actually doing it with a summariser, and that relationship with your summariser, I've been very lucky with all my Albion summarisers, has been excellent. That it's that relationship as well that you can bounce off each other, and hopefully that resounds to the listener as well.
It most certainly does. I mean, as I say, long-time listener, and I think you and Warren have got a fantastic partnership there. You can always you have your little bit of banter, which is great. But it's so great to hear Warren's. He's such a knowledgeable person, and the both of you, as I say, you just come across so well on the radio. So it's quite interesting you say about like the television. I think I agree. I don't think that it has the sort of romanticism, I suppose, of radio. Well, certainly for me, anyway. I'm quite romantic about the radio instead of television. But like when you say you've done television before, I've done like television like punditry on like as just like on like Sky Sports or anything like that.
No, I haven't worked. I've previously worked for ITV and Channel 5, but I haven't worked for Sky. And now I am a full staff member at the BBC. So that kind of slightly obviously restricts my role within that. I'm not too worried about it. I think obviously this, as you said, there's a certain romance, and obviously your exposure is maybe a little bit larger. But even I think people like, in terms of the BBC, John Murray, Ian Dennis, even now continue the long line of wonderful radio commentators on the network. I think there are advantages and disadvantages of covering like a club regularly. I'm often the first port of call when someone wants to know what's going on at Brighton, how they set up, how they play, this player, that player, who's coming in, who's going out, obviously, which is great because I see every game, because I commentate on every game. Saying that, some people enjoy the variety of maybe, 1 minute it's Leyton Orient, next minute it's Norwich City, whoever it may be. But at the moment, it kind of works for me. I enjoy it, and hopefully the listeners do too. So, and I think you can always fall back, can't you? If there's an anecdote from 15 years ago that I can recall, obviously that can hopefully enrich the commentary as well.
Yeah, and has it always been? Have you always sort of followed Brighton Hove Albion? So is it like a dream to?
I actually started in non-league football.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I started non-league football. The first game I did was Basingstoke Town against Tiverton Town in the FA Cup, doing updates. That was I've probably never been more nervous, to be honest, because that you eventually get the chance. I mean, they say you can either do it or you can't, and you don't know until you try, and that's pretty true. And I ended up doing a fair bit of National League and National League South. And I used to travel up to sort of 3 hours just to do non-league commentaries at places like Tamworth. Was my first full commentary at the Lamb. in amongst the Tamworth fans. I had my kit between my legs. My kit wouldn't work to begin with. And you go through all these things, you drive home, you're thinking, is this what it's all about? But I persisted, and, gradually I've managed to, I suppose, get enough experience that people took me seriously, and went from that point with the support and help of others, of course, as well. And, I'm delighted that now I've got the chance to, be commentating on a Premier League club as well.
So I'm going to ask, throughout the years, what's been your favourite moment covering Brighton Hove Albion?
My favourite moment, I know it's an obvious one, but the promotions are special. And I think not necessarily if you're talking about, you take moment, because that's not just about the football, because they probably weren't always the best games. I think the win against Dagenham and Redbridge was, even when I interviewed the players afterwards, they said, Gus will be moaning about that one because it was so open, too open. He didn't like it, but they got there in the end, but he was still moaning. But I think the atmosphere around it, everything that's happening around the club, I think on nights like that, or, the Wigan one where, it's going to happen, but then we had to wait, didn't we, for the other result to come through, and all the drama of going with that. So I think those are special, special moments. And for me, because, I don't always see the fans. I do see some. They come up to me in chat, and that's really, really lovely. I do get some lovely emails. We converse on social media sometimes. But actually, that's what it's all about. It's the most important relationship. Even as Graham Potter said, it is. And, I do love the fans dearly. And for me, when I think back, and my family connections to the days of, leaving the Goldstone ground, the heartache over that, being in the wilderness for so long, I guess meant it was, as a journalist, I'm a sort of reporter, commentator. As a journalist, it's all about the story. And Brighton and Hove Albion has always had a story. And that's that moving from Withdean, that promotion, moving to the Amex, perfect timing, as Gus said. Then the move from the Championship to the Premier League for the first time in their history. It's a wonderful story. And that's hopefully what I like doing, is telling stories. And those moments are just so key.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned just whilst you were speaking there that Wigan game, and the celebrations after. You were right in amongst those, the players all around you. What are your standout memories from seeing the fans pour onto the pitch? It just must have been such a spectacle.
It was a real spectacle. I was a little bit worried because of my kit, because I was being invaded at the same time, just like the pitch was. I've not really had a mass pitch invasion, really. There was a little bit one at Walsall, I think, when they won the League One title, and there was a little bit one at Withdean. It wasn't quite the same because it was so open and everything. But what struck me about that moment at Wigan was when I looked down on the pitch, the different generations of fans. There was one granddaughter who was with her, looked like a grandfather, and he had a little stick with him. And I just thought that was one of the most beautiful moments that you could have, them sharing that together. Meanwhile, I've got, Baram Kayal's studs in my shoulder, as he basically thought he was putting his foot on the table, but was actually basically cutting into my shoulder. My kit started sliding off the table as Sam Baldock came from that side, and Warren was trying to bat him back. And we were trying to hold on to the kit, because if we let go of the kit, it's gone and the broadcast is gone. So part of it was self-preservation. But you're right. And I'm very, pleased that, obviously it's been captured in photos in newspapers and stuff, to be at the heart of it, because we are at the heart of the story. We are the ones that went to Grimsby and Scunthorpe and places like that, but to still be there on the day that they head into the Premier League was really special. And that was a really good special group of players who, were there. And actually having the chairman there, letting him sort of, let himself go, was absolutely brilliant as well. Paul Barber, everybody with their shirts off, it was just, fabulous memories.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how you talk about it and instantly these images just flash up in your mind of it. It was a magical day, probably one of the greatest moments in this club's proud history. So Johnny, just to flip it on its head then, and we talk about the really good stuff, has there ever been a match where you've commentated and because of the weather, because of what you've seen on the pitch, you're just thinking, I just want this match to end?
There's been a few of those, to be honest. Weather-wise, if it gets really cold, if it goes, sub -5 or whatever, it's tough. Because as a commentator, you don't move very much, and trying to keep warm. I know it sounds a ridiculous thing to say. You start to affect how you're thinking and how you're moving and what you're trying to concentrate, because it is quite taxing. I don't know if you've ever tried to talk non-stop for an hour and a half without interruption. It is quite demanding at times, and particularly if it's a really bad game. So the weather can play a key factor, and the circumstances and the commentary boxes you've been in. I've been seeing some shockers in there before. I remember the old Chesterfield ground, and I literally couldn't get myself out of it. Even Everton nowadays is pretty poor, but you've got the block view, whether it's Crystal Palace or Luton, you can't see either goal. They're always very challenging, but sometimes it's about what's happening on the pitch. And I remember an away game at MK Dons when there was nothing on it, mid-table. I seem to remember Jake Forster-Kasky making his debut in that game. It was 0-0, and that was just about the only interesting thing that happened from start to finish. There was virtually no one in the ground. It didn't have anything riding on it. No one wanted to be there. And those are the ones that are a real struggle. And again, it comes back to the story. There is no story, and that's the problem. I remember, people often say, what was the most challenging interview you ever did? And I have to say, one of them is probably the 7-1 defeat to Huddersfield under Russell Slade. Having your goalkeeper sent off, and then your goalkeeper letting one in from the penalty spot straight after, losing by that amount. That was really tricky. But in a way, there was still a story to it. It had a significance. And sometimes if games don't have a significance, that can be really hard going. If you've got 7-8 goals flying in, top left, all around the pitch, and there's stuff happening and there's sendings off, it's not a problem. But some of those 0-0 draws are the ones where you have to draw on every single bit of experience. I seem to remember we ended up talking that MK Dons game. We ended up talking about footballers' hairstyles and what were the most ridiculous ones you've ever had, what you've ever seen. It was fun. We just tried to make it a fun listen, because bottom line is nothing was happening on the pitch.
Yeah, that must be really tough. I've never thought about it from that perspective before, but now as soon as you said it, yeah, that makes total sense. So talking about grounds, you mentioned a few grounds there. Are there any grounds that you just love going to? You think, oh, we get to go to the Etihad, or we get to go to Old Trafford. Are there any grounds that get you really excited?
In terms as a commentator?
Yeah.
The new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is unbelievable. It has that sort of feeling of just epic. It is an epic stadium. I think it's got quite a continental feel. I've been lucky enough to do UEFA Cup games and been abroad, and I think foreign clubs do tend to have a slightly different atmosphere, and that can be quite nice. And it gives me a feel of that continental style game, which is something a little bit special. And hopefully we'll have those at the Amex soon. But so that is really a special stadium from that point of view. I quite like some of the old. Dare I say it, Crystal Palace, because of what's riding on it. It's old school, it's noisy, it's ramshackle, it's horrible, but it creates a great atmosphere, and that's what it's about. As a commentator, I can feed off that. And if you get a moment like Neil Maupay lobbing the keeper in the final minute, that's what it's all about, isn't it? But some of them have been fantastic. I've been lucky enough to go to places like Inter Milan and places like that. I think there is something special about being abroad. But some of those old school ones are tremendous. Funnily enough, I think some of the bigger clubs don't necessarily have the better stadiums. Everton has a fantastic atmosphere, but again, the facilities are, severely lacking. Bit like Manchester United as well. But I've really enjoyed going to Tottenham Hotspur's new stadium, and actually White Hart Lane was great as well. I seem to remember a League Cup game. We used to be right behind the dugout. I think Christian Walton made his debut in that game, and that was a really good atmosphere as well.
You can absolutely skip this question if you want to. You might not be able to answer it. But who has been the most challenging manager? And you talk about it's about the story. Then it's about communication as well from those inside the club. Who's been the most challenging manager to get that story or to get something from?
Well, I'm certainly not going to say Graham Potter, am I? No, he's great to deal with. Generally, they are pretty good to deal with, and you build a relation. Coming back to what I was saying earlier on about obviously covering the club week in, week out can be beneficial because you can build up a relationship, but it can be slightly detrimental because obviously you've got to go back 2 days later and start asking them questions again. Whereas some reporters know I can ask him what the hell I like because I'm not coming back for another 6 months. And he probably won't even remember me by then. So that poses its problems. I think for different reasons. I mean, Russell Slade was very honest. I found him absolutely fine. Gus was quite tricky and spiky at times, particularly when they'd lost. He had an obsession about stats from the BBC, which weren't actually provided by us, but that used to be a bone of contention. But, you know, he was called the radio for a reason. You know, I just asked one question and boom. You could say my job was quite easy because he always had something to say. Probably more challenging is when you get someone like Oscar Garcia, whose English isn't very good, and he was wanting to say stuff, but maybe found it a little bit more challenging. And those are probably the more difficult ones. But you're always trying to elicit different things from managers and different topics. You know, Chris Hughton was very sort of straight down the line, honest, but he's quite guarded as well. So it's trying to just eke out a few things from him as well. But they're all different. That's the beauty of it. And I think probably every manager admits or knows that they won't be in the job for the whole lifetime. So, you know, I always say to some up and coming commentators and reporters, careful what you wish for, because you never quite know what's coming around the corner. So, but generally I've been very, very lucky.
Decent. I suppose similar sort of question, but from a player perspective, because I mean, I'm sure there must be some players that you absolutely love to chat to. Are there any particular Brighton players in the squad now that you love to chew their ear off?
I mean, access to players has changed slightly. So, and because of the demands of being in the Premier League and a global club now, so you do get less time. But obviously, I do enjoy those that I have a really good relationship. I mean, Lewis Dunk is somebody I've covered since his debut, right throughout his career. You know, he's heading up to 400 appearances. So, you know, he doesn't do too much media, but I think I've seen him change and develop and become more confident, more mature. And that's something that, you know, I enjoy. On the same level, I do like chatting to Solly because he's a local boy and he's, you know, he knows where I'm coming from. I know where he's coming from. And that's quite nice as well. But it's nice to speak to sort of, you know, stellar stars as well, isn't it? You know, you look at what Albion have got at the moment. I mean, it is quite incredible, really. I mean, Enoch Mwepu, you could not dislike the bloke. Honestly, he is. I would love to just. I know he's not going to go on a night out with us all, is he? But you could imagine he would just be fun. You know, he's just a fun guy. He's got a smile on his face. He's absolutely adorable. Honestly, you know, he's just infectious. You know, I just walk away, just, you know, I'm buzzing. You know, having spoken to him, he's a great guy. But speaking to people like, you know, Leandro Trossard, you know, very intelligent, sees the game well, you know, as well. So, you know, there's some great guys in there. You know, I mean, Adam Webster's an absolute trooper for me. And obviously, I think, you know, the difficult time is when players don't want to do the interviews, you know, and the ones who will stump up, that will come out, that will face the music and give an honest appraisal. And I always respect them for that. They don't have to do it. Some of them don't want to. I totally understand that. I probably wouldn't want to either. We've all been in a bit of a mood on a Friday night after our five-a-side teams lost and you missed that open goal to win it. You know, would you want to have someone stick a microphone in your face? No, probably not. But no, there's some real characters, and I think actually characters are really important in a squad. You know, it's about a combination of players. You can't have players that are all the same. You can't have loads of quiet ones. You can't have loads of jokers. You can't have, you know, you need kind of everyone being a leader. It doesn't work like that always. So, but no, they've got some wonderful people. The new additions are fabulous, aren't they? I mean, Mark Cucurella, I don't know if you saw the award ceremony. You know, they say he's an absolute, like, scream in the changing room, and I can believe it because he's got a real wicked sense of humour.
Johnny, I meant to ask actually, how do you go about approaching an interview when it's quite clear that they don't want to actually communicate or talk? How do you deal with that?
What, the actual interview, or trying to approach them to do the interview?
The actual interview.
The actual interview. I think it's all about context sometimes and perspective. You have to be aware that they're probably in the heat of the moment and their emotions are running high. They put a lot of physical effort and mental effort into what they've just done. And being fair, I think, if you generally are fair, then you're okay. I mean, I talk about that Russell Slade interview. He was very honest, actually, and he apologized to the fans. And I gave him that opportunity. And that's, I think, the job of the reporter. I think if you're unfair, then I think that's unreasonable, really. But as long as you're reasonable, however, sometimes I have had to turn around, and whether it's a manager, and just say, is it time for you to leave the football club? Have you done everything you can do? That's my job. I'm employed by the BBC I'm a public service broadcaster. I'm employed by you, the public, because you pay your license fee. And that's the job that I do. So, but with reason and with fairness and with respect. And I think if you add those three things into whatever you ask, you should be on the right lines.
Definitely. It's, just thinking of that idea of like pushing those hard questions, I suppose. Maybe not now because we've just seen the season end, but I suppose in a few months when the season does start again, I suppose people will be looking to you to be asking questions about transfers and all sorts. And obviously the club play their cards very close to the chest, and I think rightfully so. Do you, as a commentator, as a pundit that works quite closely with the club, do you ever, and I'm not asking you to give us any information whatsoever, but are you ever sort of like privy to any information before it becomes public, or is that, do you find out at the same time as the rest of us?
I think, as a journalist, it's always about contacts. And I still have people whose number in my phone that I had when I first started out. I'll try and use an example of somebody who maybe, say for instance, John Hollins is a person who, used to be a manager. He was manager at Weymouth, obviously inextricably linked with Chelsea, but he's somebody I could pick up the phone to and just ring and have a chat to, if I was going to Stamford Bridge. Those sorts of people, you find out, I'm not going to go into too much detail in Brighton, obviously from that respect, but there are people who within football, who you've dealt with in the past, and it's about trust. And, I would never dream of, betraying anybody's trust, because they're never going to trust you again. And it's as simple as that. So if I'm privy to it, there may be times where you might break a story and just go straight for it. Yep, no problem. But at the same time, there may be opportunities where you might think, is this really going to do me any favors? And, if you've had it double sourced, that might be another big factor in whether you would run a story as well. But you obviously have to offer a right to reply to somebody as well. So all those different issues come to bear. And it sort of comes back to what I was saying earlier about being, training. And you said, how do you start? I mean, if you've gone through all that process, when you've learned it, whether you go and do a degree in it, whether you just go straight to an apprenticeship or become a reporter straight out of school, whatever you do, if you've learned that, that'll hold you in good stead, because that helps you build up a picture. You might be privy to certain bits of information, but I think, again, things have changed. I was probably privy to more information when the club were in a different position than they maybe are now. And that's understandable, makes more sense, and actually helps the club as well. And I want to be able to help the club if I possibly can, but also do my job too.
Yeah, definitely. And as you say, it's about that trust, and you don't want to alienate yourself at all. So I totally understand that. But thank you very much for your insight there. So you've covered Brighton for a number of years now, and over that time, you have brought us some fantastic, what I like to call JC-isms. So some lines of commentary that stick with fans, and I'm sure you know what I'm going to say. But the infamous commentary line that is still played to this day at the Amex, Bridcut versus Carlisle. It's the stuff of champions. It's the stuff of dreams. How does it feel to know that you've made one of those timeless commentary statements. Because whenever I hear that at the Amex, it still gives me goosebumps. So like, how does it feel to like have that played all the time, or is it something you're a bit sick of now?
No, I'm not going to get sick of it. I think, funny enough, it is sometimes quite odd listening back to your own voice. I don't know if you guys ever do it, but extensively. But no, it feels very special. I'm very grateful to have that opportunity. I'm glad you actually mentioned the whole quote, the stuff of champions, the stuff of dreams, because quite often people cut it a little bit short. It has been copied twice by two other people. I suspect I know why and for what reason, and the timing of it as well. But that doesn't, I guess it flatters me, I suppose, to a certain degree, and is flattering. But no, it was a special sort of moment. You talk about special moments. It was a special moment, and yeah, I'm delighted that they still use it. I know it gets chopped up a little bit, and but for me, that is the full quote. I didn't just say the stuff of dreams. I said that this is the stuff of champions, and the second point came on the back of that. So from that point of view, I hope that encapsulated what was, because the idea, if you think about it, yes, because it's just 7 words or whatever it is. Actually, it was what I was trying to explain was this is the sort of things that people do when they're going to win the title. Is basically what you're saying. And it doesn't happen very often. So that is, if you nut down what that actually means, that is what it means. And I was just lucky enough. And actually, as I spoke it, the first line came to me. I said it, and then the second line came on. I don't write these things. I don't write anything down. I'm not a scripted commentator. I think that's quite sometimes even insulting to the listener as well. I understand and pre-match, I would certainly have a specific, way of introducing a game. I think that's absolutely fine. But when it comes to commentary, particularly on the radio, you're reaching for words. It doesn't always come. You don't always get it right. That's just a fact. But when you do, it's natural. And that, if you can get it right, I think is the key. But for me, yeah, obviously, for most home games, it's somewhere in there, isn't it? And actually, some of the promotion material as well. I've never done it, but I would actually quite like to listen to the 15 minutes afterwards, because I probably had verbal diarrhea. But some of the stuff I was saying, I think, does get repeated occasionally as well, about staring into the abyss and all that sort of stuff. I think I was stirring up a bit of Shakespeare in there or something. I don't know where it came from, but yeah. But no, it's really special, and I'm glad, and hopefully there's a couple of people out there that remember it was me.
Yeah.
Are there any lines? Sorry, Tom, just to cut in. Are there any lines that, because obviously that they're all over the montages and everything? Are there any lines that you remember that no one's really picked up on, that stick out to you, that you sort of go off of, or?
I don't know, really. I mean, I'm not a real sort of look back and wallow in stuff, really. I don't sort of, dissect everything I've ever done. There was one when Brighton played Wycombe away, and I thought it was like 4-3 or something like that. I think Glenn Murray scored a hat-trick, and I think a certain Mr. Hinshelwood was in caretaker charge. I may have got that wrong. But that game, and I think I said something like, I can't even remember it now. I'll have to dig it up now, won't I? But it was something like he had 2 red cards, one hat trick, 2 red cards, 8 goals, but total drama. And that again, kind of, I don't know where it came from. That's probably wrong. It's somewhere like that. I'll have to try and find it. But I remember it being a really special game. It's one of those games that just flew by. So much was going on. And yeah, it was just an incredible time. But I do remember being very proud of that moment at the time. But then probably people didn't really pick up on it. The Bridcut goal went slightly viral the day after, and then it went onto television, and then it was promoted on TV, and then they had fans talking about the commentary, and it kind of went, so it slightly got probably more exposure than some of the others over the years.
It's an iconic piece of Brighton commentary, and another one that always sticks with me. It's not a particularly long one, but it's when Anthony Knockhart scored against Wolves, and you just say he's simply box office, And it's something like that. It's so simple.
Personal favourite of mine, that one.
Is it? Oh, that's I'm pleased. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think you're just sitting there, and you know what he's like. We talk about players like Vicente or whatever, and Nancy Knockhart is another one of those players, isn't it? He gets people excited. He can be frustrating. He can be challenging, but also he's just an absolute wizard, wasn't he? With that left foot, and you're sitting there. He goes through, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, I don't even know what I'm going to say, but if he tucks this away, and I don't know, it's just a phrase that comes and and again, you reach for the words, sometimes you get them. And on that occasion, I think I did. And he was, because that is what he is. And, he gets bums off seats because he is box office. And yes, you've reminded me a good one there. So I need to start making a list of these. Probably when I retire, they'll ask me for my top 10 or something. So I probably should write these down.
Yeah, good idea. But I think Anthony Knockhart was probably one of my all-time favourite players for Brighton. Just as you say, so exciting and such a passionate man. And yeah, watching him bomb down the wing and do what he did, the goal against Crystal Palace automatically comes to mind. And when, something like that. So what a player.
Well, what a player. And I have to say, he deserves a lot of credit for opening up when he was suffering from depression, because when I started that interview, I had no idea. And we talk about, interviewing players, the honesty that he showed was incredible. Because when he used that word himself, I actually suddenly you're thinking, hang on, I need to just bear this in mind here. Here's somebody who maybe, and I think it was good for him because I think it was quite therapeutic, but he was honest. He had troubles that he wanted to explain. I think we maybe knew that he wasn't totally happy. And sometimes being happy off the pitch helps you on the pitch as well. But a special player. And I was lucky enough to go on the parade, actually. I probably won't go into too much detail, but when we had the parade down on the seafront, and he'd had a few. So he was certainly enjoying himself. But real character, and a really good guy as well.
I think we seem to forget that football players are human beings at the end of the day, and I know a lot of football players in their interviews are like, "Yes, I scored this goal and it was a really good game," blah blah blah. But when you see this human side of these football players, I think it's incredibly necessary, and it's great that they feel like they can open up to individuals such as yourself.
Yeah, and I think Graham Potter has talked a lot about that in the last couple of years. It's been a very challenging time for the whole world, really, not just everyone in this country, but also for these guys too. And I know people might find it a little bit, repetitive or whatever, but he does stress the importance of this. Imagine what you were doing when you were 17. I'm going to send you away from your family, go to another country where you can't speak the language and try and do a job. Yes, you're paid a fair money, none of which you're going to see, and go out there and perform. How difficult is that? It might be that, here's somebody whose, I don't know, marriage might be breaking up, or here's somebody whose parents are ill. Here's, people have things going on. These are human beings all the same. Now, we all want to do our job as best as we can, as long as we can, for as many times as we can, but I might have a really bad day because I might not, my job is to be up for 2:00 on a Saturday afternoon, no matter what's happening in my life. It's not always difficult sometimes. And I think that's, really important that we remember these guys are human beings. And the whole debate around being role models, I think, is quite an interesting one, actually, because during lockdown, they were used, weren't they, and pilloried a little bit for, their wages and saying they should be donating money. But then it was, oh, you need to get back playing football because the country needs you to get everyone's, hopes back up again and everything. Well, you're being toyed around. Just hang on. Let's not just forget these guys are people, and there's something that we've never seen before going around. So no, it's a really valid point. And I think, good people, having good people in your squad, in your club, is so important. And I think that's why Brighton and Hove Albion have been so successful, that players, backroom staff, administrators, through to everybody who works around the stadium, they're good people as well, good human beings. And I think that counts for a lot, because, as you say, if you remember that, treat people well, hopefully they'll respond.
Really well put, JC. Really well put. So picking up on that bit about the success of the club. Now, Brighton have just had their most successful season to date, finishing 9th in the Premier League. A fantastic away record. What have you made of this season as a whole, JC? You know, what is sort of like what are your overall thoughts on how this season has gone, and also like the little dip in the middle, because it's been a bit of a roller coaster this season, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably like the books on my shelf. It's like a bookends, aren't they? It started brilliantly, dipped away, and that was a difficult time. It was a really, really difficult time. I think people were starting to worry. I think everyone, I mean, myself included, was just, why is it? Couldn't quite work out why it was going wrong and why things weren't quite happening. Because yes, it was small margins, but it just didn't seem to be turning, and injury suspensions, all that sort of stuff. Can you use that? But you've got to say, I think the way that the one thing I love about Graham Potter is his flexibility. And I think that's what sort of got them out of that little period, because he likes to try different things. He likes to try different people. He doesn't overuse people. That ability to draw on people, play them in different positions. If you think of, I won't say the obvious one, but say you look at Alexis McAllister when he played as the false nine. The next game, he's playing as the sitting midfielder, replacing Yves Bissouma. That sort of flexibility, I think, has really held them in good stead. And everyone goes on about, the lack of goals and if only they had a striker. And I see pundits, on television. It's a really quite basic view of Brighton and Hove Albion. And again, it comes back to what I was saying. I'm lucky enough and privileged enough to watch every single game, so I can maybe give a little bit more context to it, because that's not really strictly true. And we can talk about Neil Mopé and this guy scored more goals than anyone else in the last couple of seasons. So let's not get away from that. So I think that flexibility is there. I think there's been periods where it's been difficult. I think the squad strength maybe it's got a little bit exposed at certain times. And obviously to lose someone like a Lewis Dunk for a long period of time has never happened before. Adam Webster out, I thought, changed their play from the back, and that's what they were trying to do. And missing that component, I think, hit them quite hard as well. And Graham Potter just need a little bit of time to work on different ideas and different ways of trying to counteract that. And it's been brilliant, hasn't it? And you talked about my favourite moment. And again, I say Graham Potter got it right. He has provided, and his squad have provided, obviously, some amazing moments. And they just, I bet you've probably even forgotten the opening day at Burnley. No one's been talking about that. Everyone's talking about Man United, wasn't it brilliant? Blah, 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 blah. Last minute, Tottenham, wasn't it great? Whatever. What about Brentford? That last minute goal there. There's just been some tremendous moments in the season. And as fans, I think everyone should just really relish it, enjoy it, because there's going to be difficult times ahead. There always is. The Premier League is such that there will be periods for every club where you don't quite get what you want. Doesn't matter, even if Liverpool went through a bit of a sticky patch, but they bounce back, and that's the most important thing. But it's been tremendous. It's been full of wonderful memories, lovely moments, and yeah, the stats don't lie, do they, in terms of points, goals scored and goals conceded.
Yeah, exactly that. And you say about like people forgetting about the start of the season. And me and my friend Toby, who started this podcast, and we got these guys on later on, but we were joking about European tours back then, like just tongue in cheek, because it was just so like, wow, is this the Brighton we were watching last season during lockdown? Because there were some really frustrating times, and obviously we played really well, but we weren't getting the results, and then suddenly we were. And it just goes to prove how short people's memories are these days in football. That obviously, as you say, amazing starts to the season. Yes, we had a dip, but I would say 18 other clubs had their own dip. So yeah, it's always going to happen in the Premier League.
Yeah, and it's difficult to make that comparison because you quite rightly say about lockdown, things were different. Some people, did well out of lockdown. Some people didn't. Some people struggled. I think like Sheffield United really struggled not to have fans in their own stadium, and that was a key to their success for a certain period of time, and they struggled a little bit. So making comparisons is always difficult, I think, and even making an assessment of the whole season is sometimes not necessary. You can look at calendar years, can't you, or home, away, or top six, or it's all quite random metrics, really, to a certain degree. So from that point of view, I think you make a really valid point, and making that comparison can be really, really difficult.
For me, I would say under Potter especially, it feels like there's been a lot of really good sort of changes in the sense of it's been the little things for me. I remember when Potter tragically lost his parents, and to see the fan base get so behind Potter, and I think we won a game not long after that, and just see him get so emotional with the crowd and us cheer him on. And I remember towards the end of the season, you could see Neil Mopay was in a particularly bad way, and me and Joe were actually at a game, and he was subbed off, and everyone was cheering for him, and we were just getting all behind him. And it's those little things which I think we need to look at and say, yeah, that's great. That's a really great moment.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, Graham Potter found out about, I think it was the death of his father, and 2 hours later he was doing the press conference for the next game, and he hadn't even told anyone. And that's what he's had to go through. So credit to him. He could quite easily got someone else to do it, but he felt like maybe that he had to do it or wanted to do it. Again, you're right. The support for Neil Mopay. We actually commentated when we were commentating. We actually mentioned it, how good it was. He'd had a real shocking game, hadn't he? And it just missed. Nothing went right for him and everything. But he went behind the goal, didn't he? And everyone was cheering his name. And I just thought, that's brilliant, you know. And I think that positivity, because there were a few negative noises, weren't they? Particularly, I think everyone highlights the Leeds game. It's a small minority, isn't it? In general, people I think are quite supportive, but that's what you're called. You're called a supporter, and that's what I always think. You know, be a supporter. If you're struggling a little bit, forget yourself as a fan. You're actually a supporter, and that can make a real difference. And no, I think you're absolutely spot on.
It's funny that you mentioned about the Leeds game, because when I listened to you and Johnny commentate, you and Warren commentate on the Wolves game, the Wolves fans, you could hear them booing in the background, and Warren passed some comment about, oh, I wonder if this is going to be in the national news, which I found quite funny. Warren does always make me laugh, which is good skills. How is it commentating with Warren? I mean, we've spoken a lot about yourself, but obviously, like, I always think of like you as a bit of a duo. How is it, being there with Warren? And getting to talk about football.
Yeah, from my point of view, it's great. I mean, he'll tell you that he's the one with the talent, that's for sure. No, I'm only kidding. No, we get on pretty well. I think hopefully that comes across on air. We don't always agree, and I think that's probably a good thing. Everyone's entitled to their opinions. I mean, obviously, I am a commentator and he is a summarizer, so I think there is a slightly different role there. I'm not a big fan of this word co-commentator. I don't like it. Because that sort of means you're repeating what the commentator's saying, and that's not really what you're there for. He is an expert. He has played the game at the highest level. That's his job. My job is slightly different, even though I am entitled to an opinion as well. But no, it's brilliant. And I think for me, it's about honesty for him. He tells it like it is. And I think when he first came on board, I've had some brilliant summarizers before him. I think it was a bit of a shock to some of the fans, to be honest, the way he said it. But I think in the long run, people now respect him because he was honest, because he'll say when they're brilliant. You said about amazing bits of commentary. Here's an amazing bit of commentary. Am I watching Brighton? Am I watching Barcelona? Now, that's been copied by somebody else as well. For a fact, I've seen it with another team who clearly have watched it on the club feed and then thought, I'll write that down and then I'll copy it and then I'll insert different name and whatever it may be. He came up with that. That was brilliant. It summed it totally up. So when they're going well, he will shout to the rafters. But if they're not, he'll tell it like it is as well. And I think as a listener, that is what you want. But at the same time, not a lot's happening and he's having a bit of fun. He'll take the mickey out of me about what's happening on the side of the pitch, the clobber that I'm wearing or whatever it may be. He's quite happy to do that, and I'm quite happy for him to do it because he's a tremendous asset. He's a lovely guy, and I think hopefully anyone who walks up to him on the concourse or something would have a good chat with him, and he'd be honest with them as well.
Tom, you spoke about JC-isms. We've got Warrenisms as well. I remember we've only got 10 men as well. That's
absolutely. And in a way, that's probably should be one of our proudest moments, because I say one thing, don't I? And then he sort of, it's a bit like I send in the cross and he nods it in. It kind of, that's that duo working together at its best. You're absolutely spot on. That was another one I need to write down as well. So, yeah, and I think he's got better over the years. I think he's learned more. I think he feels inspired at the Premier League level. we had some, we used to get home at 6 a.m. from Blackburn. We got all the way to Blackburn, I remember, and then we got there. And as I walked along the side of the pitch about 12 o'clock, the referee just did that. It's off. It's off. And we're just thinking, what? The team weren't even there. We had to come back on the Tuesday to play the rearranged game. And then on the Saturday, I think we went to Burnley. And we were getting home at like 6 a.m. The motorways were shut, to be with, well, probably my company, but to be in his company, sometimes you're pushed to the limit doing the job we do. But he is incredibly resilient and really good company. And sometimes we just have to sit there and laugh as we're sitting in Cheltenham services once, I think, when the M6, the M4 and the M5 had all been shut. And we were going through, I don't know where we were going through. I think we didn't even know where we were. We ended up at Cheltenham about 5 a.m. thinking, well, we'll get home eventually, but what the hell, So, no, he's great fun. And he's, I think, become a really good pundit. And, that's why you now hear him on network programs and TV programs, people asking his opinion because, they respect him.
Yeah, definitely. I think the pair of you are absolutely brilliant at the job that you do. And long may it continue. And talking of long may it continue, looking ahead, JC, we've just spoken about how we've had an amazing season as a club. What do you think the future holds for this team under Graham Potter? We've got a lot of exciting loan prospects coming back to the club, the likes of Mitoma, Undav, and Van Heck as well. Do you think that Brighton need to strengthen much in the summer? And if they do, what would you like to see? Who would you like to see brought in, I suppose?
Well, you can't stand still in the Premier League. So I think you always need to be looking to improve. And I think that's why if you look every single season, there's been an improvement upon improvement upon improvement. And you've got to do that. Particularly, they've got to where they have. It's incredible, really. Expectations are going to be so high. And that's something that they're going to have to temper to a certain degree. But there is young talent there. Some of them will get an opportunity. Some of them won't. Graham Potter needs to have a look at them, see which ones he thinks can make it. He's already made the decision on the likes of Sarmiento, so Alzate previously. Raider Kadra is another one who's, he's already played for the Albion, hasn't he, at Manchester City? So could he feature? So there's a lot of talent out there. But at the same time, I think if you want to keep getting better, you need to keep getting better players. If you think of, was Leandro Trossard an upgrade on what was there before? Probably. We're now starting to see him, being linked to big moves and, to big clubs because he's a big player. You need to continue to do that. The one thing they have got in their favour is, one, they're very good at maintaining their players. Their players, if they don't want them to leave. I go hark back to someone like Dale Stevens, who was really important, and they had loads of bids for him, and they just knocked them back. That's good. Tony Bloom is very good at that, I think. The second is that they've got a very good recruitment setup, and we see Moises Caicedo and what an impact he's made. Yes, he's probably got a little bit more experience than maybe the likes of Kozłowski or someone like that. But these guys are a little bit younger and maybe haven't played quite as much football. So I think all the components are there, but you do need to keep improving. And the sheer fact that Brighton and Hove Albion were linked to a player like Darwin Núñez, come on, look at what's happening there now. So they've got that in place. But I do think that they will probably need to just strengthen a couple of little areas just with that little bit of experience, because it's quite a lot of pressure to put on younger players who maybe you mentioned, was it Van Heck you mentioned? He's only actually had one season in the Championship, hasn't he? So it's quite a lot to ask maybe of him to make that step up, but he could be there on the sidelines. But what about the call that they made with Robert Sanchez and all those people were up in arms when Matt Ryan was told, you're no longer needed? What a turnaround that's been, and what an amazing decision that was, and how that transformed the team. And the one thing is Graham Potter, he has got that ability. If he sees something, and I think he knows a good player, he knows a good person, and they got to trust in him. And you mentioned about where do they go next? It's difficult, isn't it? It's got to be, you've got to aim, I think, probably for top half again, consolidate. Could you squeeze into a European place? Maybe last season was a bit of a missed opportunity. You think a couple of moments, maybe. Would that have been a stretch for that squad? Yes. But if we look back over the years, relatively recently, Southampton have made it to Europe. Burnley have made it to Europe. There's no reason why that can't be an ambition. But I think it's about consolidating. But the great thing is, with a 9th place finish, with the players that they've got, they'll be able to attract good players as well, because people will want to come. And if you see Moises Caicedo playing and you think, yeah, great. If you see Alexis McAllister, playing for Argentina and he's playing in Brighton squad, well, hang on, I might want to have some of that. So that's got to be a good thing too.
The funniest thing, you mentioned Burnley getting to Europe. Obviously, they were well excited, and then they get a draw against Aberdeen, I think it was. So, yeah, glamorous.
Yes. Well, that was the pre-season game for the Albion, wasn't it? But I think they'll be going to warmer climes this year, thank goodness. But, I used to cover every single pre-season game. Again, things have changed, haven't they? But, they wanted feeds and everything. And it was probably just me or Andy Naylor or whatever, and heading off to places like Grimsby and places like that. But some of those ex-managers who took us to some strange places, but there you go. So but it's a bit more clandestine now, but yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting season next season, I feel. No matter what happens, I think this squad under Graham Potter has so much potential. And I think we talk a lot about players, but I think, Graham Potter, I think keeping him at the club as long as we can, I think that's the number one priority in a way.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You look at all those people who said about, you only got given the second contract, having just got the first. And people are like, well, what are they doing? What are they doing? Now it looks like a masterstroke, doesn't it?
Yeah. Trust.
By the way, if I hear that Graham Potter's linked with Tottenham again, I'm gonna lose it because it seems like a constant chain of things. But
do you worry as fans? Do you worry?
Yeah, of course we do, because I feel like eventually. Sorry, Tom, it's all right. No, I feel like eventually it could be a point where he might think, what more can I do here at Brighton and whatnot. But I personally would like to see Potter in like the England job, for instance, over something else. But
not yet, though.
Not just yet.
No, I think
I think you have to look at it in its entirety about the club, his relationships with people at the club, his ambitions. I don't know his ambitions. Only he and his close family know his ambitions, I imagine. So, enjoy it while it lasts. I often say this about players. You can worry a lot about when they're gone. Just don't forget to enjoy them while you have them. He's an incredible person, incredible head coach. I think he's destined for massive things. One good thing is top sides in the Premier League certainly don't seem to like to have British managers, do they? So maybe that's one good positive. But as you say, England, maybe abroad, it won't have gone unnoticed by a lot of very, very big clubs, the job that he's doing.
Yeah, and I think the reason I say that I'm not worried, Curtis, is I trust Bloom and I trust the process of the club. I think that, as JC has mentioned, each year we've been in the Premier League, we've sort of, we're building those small steps. And I think when Chris Hughton obviously departed, it was quite a bit of what's going to happen next? And then obviously Graham Potter, a relative unknown, obviously had about half season at Swansea and had done really well. And as you say, JC, it looks like a masterstroke to bring him on board and then to give him that extended contract. So I think, as you say, we should enjoy him whilst it lasts, because I'm sure it won't be too long before some bigger teams than us start looking for his signature. So we have reached the hour mark, listeners and viewers. Thank you very much, JC, for your time this evening. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Can I quickly say, Tom, this has marked our 50th episode today, and what an honour it is to have you as a guest on our 50th.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny.
Episode.
My privilege, my pleasure, honestly. It's been really enjoyable, guys, and may you have another good 50 in you as well. And maybe I'll come back for the 100th, and then I'm not quite sure where we'll be in terms of how often that works, but it'll probably be about this time next year. But let's hope there's plenty more good things to talk about as well.
Let's get in the diary, Joe. JC 100th episode special. So thank you very much to Joe, Curtis, and Johnny Cantor for joining us on today's episode of Albion Obsessed. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content if you haven't done so already. And keep your eyes peeled on the channel, because we've got some exciting, amazing, awesome pre-season, post-season stuff still to come your way. Take it easy, guys. We've been Albion Obsessed.